Right, thanks. Oh, I should turn it back on, I suppose, shouldn't I? Thanks.
Is it working?
It was working. Oh, it is working. Oh, look at that. Wow.
Hooray.
As Abe was suggesting, we'll investigate how much it costs to get some clip-on mics for the future. Might be more convenient. Certainly, when I've spoken at U3A, twice I've spoken at U3A, I've had clip-on mic. Just a little bit about upcoming meetings. There's a book club meeting, Skeptics Book Club meeting on Sunday the 21st, talking about Christopher Hitchens' missionary position at York's Cafe. Our next meeting is on Friday the 26th, talking about religious education. That's called A Foot in the Door with Mike Lake from Derby. Our pub social is on Tuesday the 30th at the Wellington. There's a Birmingham Salon meeting, two more. Birmingham Salon meeting at the Jekyll and Hyde on Tuesday the 7th. I think that says Tuesday. On the ethics of research.
Is it the salon or is it the Cafe Saint-Effique then?
Well, I thought it was a salon meeting.
It is a salon meeting.
Yes.
Okay. But it is Birmingham Cafe Saint-Effique in fact as well, isn't it?
Maybe I think maybe that's...
There was just a confusion in the programme. Salon is salons, Cafe Saint-Effique is...
Well, they've got a meeting on the same time and the same place on the same subject. So...
All right, okay. Maybe it's a joint meeting.
I think it's billed as the Cafe Saint-Effique. But anyway, that's just so that people know that exists as well.
And I also just wanted to mention, on Friday the 17th is our inaugural Blackham lecture, when Stephen Law is coming to talk about how do we raise moral children. And we're going to try and publicise this quite widely. We're hoping to make it an important part of our annual programme in honour of Harold Blackham, who was from Birmingham. If you don't know who he was a major force in the humanist movement for many years at the second half of the last century. And we thought it would be a good way of marking his name to have an annual lecture.
We have his book in the library.
And we have his book in the library, one of his books in the library, thanks, Prince. I just want to say before we carry on, the reason Anne Dawes is not here tonight, I mentioned that Anna's the connection between me and Anthony, is that she did badly break her foot in the snow a few weeks ago, so I thought she's recovering at home at the moment, and hopefully by the time of Stephen Law's lecture she'll be able to come and join us. I did have a chat with her today, and it's a shame she's been out of action for so long. And Anne, what happened when I came back to Birmingham in about, when was that, 1984, 86? Anne helped me to find lodgings, and that was with Adrienne Bloom, who was Hyman Hamilton's granddaughter.
Correct.
And Anthony worked with Hyman Hamilton many years. And that was the reason I've been to Hyman's house. I've experienced the Seder there at Hyman's house, and been to the synagogue to see Adrian's wedding. First wedding, sorry. I just wanted to mention Hyman because it was interesting to me that he was from South Wales and his name was Hamilton, and somehow it didn't fit the image to me of Jews in Britain being in South Wales and having the surname Hamilton. And let's really just talk a little bit about how Jews got their surnames and how they came to live in industrial communities in South Wales, for example.
Well, in Hammy's case, his name was originally just Himmelstein. It was just blue sky and the stone in the sky. It was just changed, anglicised to Hamilton. His father was an itinerant preacher, preaching the Jewish word up the Welsh mountains. Now, I'm not quite certain how well it went down, but that's what he grew up in, that sort of environment. His older brother was Ben Hamilton, was the coroner who presided over the Aberfan coal disaster. Ben didn't sleep for weeks after the disaster. The nightmares of what he had to go through. So the Hamiltons or Himmelsteins there were quite well established in South Wales. I understand Adrian's. There's a certain incongruity in some of these things. How did Jews get their names? Well, two Jews, three opinions. In so many different ways. Some of them are very straightforward. If you came from Berlin, you become Berliner, maybe. Or if you came from Amsterdam, Amsterdammer, or Hollander. Place names. An ancestor of mine, one Jonas Lazarus, he lived in Lincoln. Very few Jews lived in Lincoln, but he did. one of his sons became Isaac Lazarus Lincoln. He settled in Australia. He became the first practitioner of ritual circumcision in the area of Port Phillip, now known as Melbourne, and this is in the 1840s. He had a row with the chief rabbi at the time because he was very, very liberal. If somebody said, "I want to be Jewish, will you circumcise me?" he did, and that was good enough for him. The purists back at the ranch in Aldgate and so on didn't like it very much. However, names get translated. A common Jewish name, Taylor, might have been Schwab. In Schneider, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Abe. Schneider, just translated Schneider to Taylor. Grunberg, Greenhill, or just Green. My wife's family, Moscovich, became Moss. There are so many ways, and the trouble is you don't always know, and sometimes they're just... I knew of one case where they changed the name to King because they liked the idea of royalty, and they thought because of King was a nice idea. And another family I knew that came to Britain in the 1930s, and the name was Rompolovsky, and they thought they'd make a nice English surname, and they looked in the phone directory for what was going, and came up with Goldberg. There are no set rules, I'm afraid. Each mishpacha, which is the Hebrew word for family, each mishpacha has its own degree of mishpachology.
Yeah, I've got one. Mine's Bakken, and it was Bakanovsky.
Well, there you go. Yes, shortening a name like Moscovich to Moss is.
My maiden name was Shapiro, and there are a million Shapiros.
Yes,
I don't know where that. Was it always
Shapiro means something. I've just forgotten what it means. Do you know, Helen? What it's that's another thing. Names are sometimes religious. I mean, like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, or Cohen, which means a priest, or Levi. Yeah, these Solomon. I mean, they're biblical names. Many Jews will have these sorts of things. But then you see, I knew some people called Cohen who changed their name to Clifton. Why Clifton? No idea. It just sounded what they wanted.
in the 30s, people.
Yes, a lot of people wanted to avoid.
That's
Well,
why my family was
also in the First World War, a lot of people didn't like Germanic-sounding names. A lot of people changed their Germanic names to something much more English sounding.
The royal family did that, didn't
Yes, exactly, like Battenberg to Mountbatten and that sort. Yes,
Coburg, good.
yeah. There's no easy answer to that one, I'm afraid. That is what's called a shiler, a difficult question.
Do we have any more difficult questions? Hey, go on.
Anthony,
Do you want this,
I think
Abe?
I can project I don't need that. I've known you for a very long time.
This is true.
One of the questions that I've always wanted to put to someone as knowledgeable historically as yourself, and your talk proved that absolutely, and that is the question of anti-Semitism. I find this now quite remarkable, the rise in anti-Semitism, not only in England but within Europe, and its broadcast and the media and what is taking place. Particularly the most recent example was Lord Ahmed and his criticism of Jewry, particularly with their influence over the media and also the law. What is your judgment with regard to the rise, particularly over the past years, of anti-Semitism?
It's a very, very difficult question to answer. Anti-Semitism is real, but it's also sometimes, if you like, fueled by something that has happened. It's also sometimes perception. There's an old story of two Jews having a meal in a restaurant, and it's a very cold night. And as they get there arguing and talking, as they leave the restaurant, they leave the door open, a blast of cold air, and all the other diners shout, "Shut the door!" And one says, "As you see," he says, "anti-Semitism for you." That is a joke, of course, but Abe's question is a very serious one. It's demonization of a minority is a human failing. And the out group, yes, I'm a Jew, so of course I've perceived some of these things, but I think it happens in all sorts of other ways. When black people first came to this country and other migrant groups, I don't think it's anti-Semitism as such, and although there are some curious features about anti-Semitism, there was vile anti-Semitism in Poland after the war, although all the Jews had virtually been expelled or murdered by Hitler. It was an anti-Semitism without Jews. That is very difficult to explain, but the people would see a Jewish conspiracy in local government in parts of Poland. A lot of it also is the way it is reported. I went to Cambridge University, and shortly after I left, there was it was discovered amongst the files of employment bureaus. People had made remarks like "nasty Jewish-looking man," that sort of thing, in people seeking employment. Now, I mean, this actually happened. This certainly isn't made up. That actually happened. Why would someone want to do that? I mean, it's sometimes very difficult. Sometimes maybe they've experienced something in their childhood and it's stuck, and then everybody gets tarnished with the same label. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to your question, Abe. It certainly is a worrying question. Lord Ahmed's was particularly scurrilous because he blamed Jewish influence on how he got his convictions, although he killed somebody on the road because he was using his mobile phone and wasn't watching what he was doing, and he killed somebody. He ran them over. Of course, it was an accident. He didn't do it on purpose. It's very difficult to say that the conviction for doing something like that is because of Jewish influence over the media, which is what he did. Mind you, he didn't say it in this country. He said it in some obscure journal in Pakistan where it got picked up, and this is the thing. Today, we live in a global village. You can say something in outer Mongolia, and the next thing, it's all over Canberra and Wellington, if you see what I mean. There's no... I don't know quite how to express it, but... It's a phenomenon. It won't go away. It's been with us throughout the centuries, and it will continue. But it's not always specifically directed against the Jews, and it's sometimes very difficult to get the right perspective. When I was a small boy, the State of Israel was founded, and I can remember other kids at my school mocking and teasing me about British soldiers who'd been killed in then Palestine and so forth. I didn't know what they were talking about. To be truthful, they didn't either, but it was what their parents had said. All I knew was that there was some political trouble somewhere in the world, and the Jews were somehow being held to account for it. I don't know, Abe. I mean, I've wandered over the topic because it's an important topic, but I am no expert. You need somebody really, not just a historian, you need a sociologist to give it. I think somebody else wants to...
Karen first, and then Eddie.
I wanted to say, don't you think it's quite difficult now...
Sorry, can't hear.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, don't you think it's quite difficult now to unpick anti-Semitism from anti-Zionism? That people who oppose what things that Israel does may not necessarily be anti-Semitic, but maybe seem to be.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. I think there is a blurring of the ethnic lines between Zionism and Semitism, and it's very easy to do. And it's very easy for those who say, no, I'm not against Jews, I'm just against Zionists. It's equally easy for those who say you're anti-Semitic. It's a two-way argument. I mean, I agree with you. It's a two-way. It's inescapable. Jews, of course, are involved very much in the existence of the State of Israel, and will always attract some political opprobrium. What is curious is that I read somewhere, someone was saying about that, I can't remember the exact episode, but somebody was attacked, I don't mean physically, was attacked verbally for supporting Israel, and it was pointed out to him that he actually was attacking the wrong target. It wasn't actually the Israelis. He said, well, it doesn't matter. With Israel, you have to do the wrong thing to do the right thing. Some people are going to be just prejudiced regardless. Others will have a more rational, and it is certainly possible to disagree with some of the activities of the Israeli government. It's perfectly possible to do that without in any way being anti-Semitic. I'd be the first to accept there are political dimensions which you can have a legitimate more than one point of view. But I have no real answer to your question. No one-size-fits-all answer.
Eddie?
How will the Jews deal with female circumcision and they move over to male circumcision. If
Yes.
it becomes illegal, what will they do?
Well, female circumcision is not part of Judaism. I mean, that's very straightforward. It's not, and it never has been, and I can't see it ever.
Yeah,
Male circumcision is a different matter, and of course there are arguments indeed against the autonomy and the rights of the child and not being asked and so on. I mean, I agree. The problem is you're never going to abolish it any more than you're going to abolish female circumcision amongst those groups who insist on practicing it. You can do your best to stamp it out, so to speak, if you feel that's what's got to be done, but the ways round will be found. A similar argument applies to the killing of animals for kosher meat, halal and kosher, which slaughter. Actually, no killing of an animal for meat is pleasant. There's no way in which an animal can be in. Stunning doesn't always work. The stunner doesn't always, and it's questionable. Physiologists have actually examined animals having the blood, the sharp knife, and they lose consciousness within 20 to 30 seconds. It's not pleasant, and no one would suggest it is, but it's probably no more cruel than non-kosher stunning, and yet, because emotively a lot of people will think this is bad news and it should be stamped out, there will always be movements wanting to abolish practices of these sorts, and there will always be ways round it. As long as there are people on the planet and groups with sufficient numbers, there'll always be these tensions. I've no answer to your question. I recognise the dilemma. That's the best I can say to you. And I am not a theologian. I'm just a sort of agnostic Jew.
John? Yes?
2 questions, Anthony. First, what were your ancestors selling on the market stall? Sure, we'd all like to know.
Haberdashery, at least that officially, probably cocaine and heroin.
Well, of course, the most famous peddler of all was Marks and Spencer.
Yeah, Marks and Spencer's. Don't ask the price, it's a penny. Yes.
And the other question is really a request. Could you run past us again, please, the way the Jews found out from Palestine into Europe and across North Africa? Because I think you were talking about 2 groups.
Yes. Yes. What happened after the sacking of the Second Temple in 70 of the Common Era? The Jews, large numbers of Jews, were evicted from Palestine by the Romans. They tended to move east and west in almost equal numbers. The ones that went west crossed the North African littoral and then up through Gibraltar, Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and then across France, so migrating slowly in that direction. The others, going east, went Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and then up north, beyond the Black Sea, through Russia, or what is modern, I'm using modern, the countries weren't called those in those days, but in modern technology, modern terms, then when they got up further north, they then started migrating west, so came across to western Russia, the Pale of Settlement, Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, all the Baltic states, and also Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary, and so forth, and then gradually migrating through Germany, and then until the groups started to mingle a little bit. Although they had a remarkable sense of distrust of each other for a very long time, the Sephardim in Britain certainly regarded themselves as upper crust, and those Eastern European migrants that came, the Untermenschen almost, that came from Eastern Europe, we've got to educate them and get rid of their terrible habits. Lord Rothschild, in the 19th century, the first Lord Rothschild established a fund for teaching migrants English and so forth. At the time of the 1891 census, the enumerators going around the East End of London, we used to take a Yiddish translator with them to help fill up the forms on the census form, because the population had no adequate knowledge of English to handle it, but it was compulsory to complete the forms. There's some quaint examples of what happened. My late wife's grandfather, who incidentally was the chief minister at Singers Hill Synagogue in Birmingham, his family came from a place called Turkowiec in Poland. The enumerator didn't believe that such a place existed, so put Turkey, which of course is latter-day genealogists like me found this a bit tricky to handle. But luckily my mother-in-law was alive at the time and was able to enlighten me as to what had happened. I mean, there are all sorts of little wrinkles of these sorts of things. Does that help you at all in picturing the migrations? It took a few centuries. It didn't happen overnight. They didn't have bed and breakfast scattered around the place, serving kosher breakfasts and things.
Is the word diaspora a Jewish word?
I don't think it's a Jewish word, but it does refer, of course, to the dispersion of the Jewish people. I don't think it's a Hebrew word. Do you know?
Diaspora isn't.
No.
It's not. It's a derivation of the word of dispersing.
Yes, I know it means dispersion.
It's from diaspora, comes from the word dispersion.
Oh, right.
Spreading out.
I don't think it's a Hebrew word, though.
No, it isn't.
No.
It is Greek, surely. Two parts. Diaspora.
Oh, it's two words, is it?
I would have thought so. Yes. It's Greek.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I've never really thought about it, where it came from. I've known about its existence, but never really worked out what started it.
But diaspora does not mean just the Jews.
No, exactly. It's
across all nations.
It's just dispersion. Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about Torah. Is it law?
Torah, yeah, the Torah is the Hebrew word meaning the law, yes. So it is said in Jewish tradition that Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the Torah. He'd gone up the hill, and the boss spoke to him and said, take these tablets of stone down, and this is the Torah that the Jews will live by. Meanwhile, they had a bit of fun in Egypt with the golden calf and flesh pots of Egypt. They weren't all that keen to receive it. It had to be done again 3 months later at the Festival of Shavuos.
The Torah does not actually refer to the law. The Torah is the 5 books.
5 books of Moses, yes.
And that's the Pentateuch.
But they
from whence Jewish law.
But the Jewish law is derived. Yes. Yes.
I'm asking about how it differs, how the Jewish law differs from the British one.
Oh well. That's really too.
So there's a lot of talk now about Sharia law.
Oh, yes.
But is there anything similar in the Jewish community?
Well, yes, they're similar, but the Jewish law, one of the first things in Jewish law is that you abide by the law of the kingdom you live in. I suppose that you are commanded in Jewish law to obey the civil law, and that carries equal weight as... if the civil law tells you mustn't eat kosher, well, yes, then there would be a dichotomy. But in general terms, if the civil law says,
thou shalt not kill.
Exactly. You obey the civil. It's commanded in Jewish law to obey the civil law, and actually the chief rabbi's court, the so-called Beth Din, is actually recognised in British law as being able to solve problems. It has the force of British law. If a case is taken to the Beth Din and the rabbis, the judges, technically the word called dayanim, the judges, rule on the case, even if it's not a Jewish religious case, if it's agreed and the participants agree to abide by it, it then has the force of English civil law. So in some sense it's parallel with Sharia, but the concepts are quite different. But for most part, Jewish law, it refers to Jewish religious practice, the things you may, should and should not do in terms of your religious life, rather than not committing murder, which is covered by civil law or criminal law, if you follow what I mean. But there are some things where the overlap is so great it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's a whole section in the Torah and the books of Moses about how you shouldn't shortchange your neighbour, give justice in dealing